Okay, everyone. My name is Dan Helms. I'm with New Readers Press, and I had the honor today of introducing our presenter. Steve Schmidt is a national adult education consultant. He served as the assistant director of adult basic skills professional development at Appalachian State University. He's worked in adult basic education for more than 30 years as an instructor, coordinator, local program director, author, Links Community Reading and Writing Group moderator, and a professional developer. He's a certified STAR trainer in evidence based reading practices, and he's authored numerous writing instructional textbooks, including Writing for the GED Test Book 4 from New Readers Press. Today he's going to share GED high impact indicators pertaining to the reading test and instructional strategies to help you address these indicators. So take it away, Professor Schmidt.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate the warm introduction. Welcome, everyone, and so glad that you are here with us this afternoon. As Dan mentioned, I have had a day or two of experience, actually 32 years experience working in the field of adult ed, and have had served part of that time as a consultant for the GED testing service. Um, but I am so glad to learn from everyone today. There's always so much more to learn, no matter how long we've been in the field. So I look forward to learning from you today. I'm going to ask yourself, please, to introduce yourself in the chat. Just tell us maybe where you're from and what you do, and go ahead and put that inside the chat. And just a reminder that as you're doing that, that you'll want to have the handout that we'll be referring to frequently during today's webinar, and put that that's in the chat also. So grab that handout, because I will be talking about page 1 and page 4. And if you don't have the handout, the page numbers won't mean much, but if you do have the handout, they will mean plenty. Okay. Well, welcome, and thank you for introducing yourself in the chat. What we're doing today is something maybe a little different than what happens in a lot of webinars, and I'm going to tell you why. Because we're actually going to do a web shop. And what I mean by that is it's not really a webinar. You can kind of be there and tune out and just listen to some talking head talk. What I want to do is do this more like a workshop. So hence the name web shop. And so, what I will ask you to do is what we've already been doing: introduce yourself in the chat. I would ask for your camera, please, to be on. And I realize that there may be some situations where that's not possible. And I get that. Having worked in adult ed for 32 years, I get that. You may be using the state issued laptop that's still running Windows 98, and the camera's been broken since 2012. Understand that. And if you're in that situation, or you're in an environment where you can't put the camera on, I get that. We will be doing a breakout session 2, and would expect full participation in that, as well as the chat. There'll be many opportunities to chat. And this session is a full 2 hours. So it is that we attend the full 2 hours. So that's the expectation for the web shop. And there is an incentive. I think the world rolls along on incentives. And so the incentive that I'll give for that full participation, where you have your camera on, participating in the chat, attending the full web shop, you will be entered into a drawing to win a GED test mastery book. These are hot off the press. I will be talking more about these later on this afternoon or this morning, depending on your time zone. But all who participate fully under those conditions that I've outlined will be entered into the drawing. I'll ask you at the end for your email, and you can go ahead and put that in, and I'll do a drawing for these GED test mastery books. So that is some incentive to look forward to, because if I know one thing about adult educators after 32 years, we are all in for the free stuff. So, so there we go. Vonda is shaking her head. Yes, she is. She said, I am all in it for the free stuff, so I'm ready to fully participate. All right. Thank you, Vonda. Good deal. So, what are we going to do today in our web shop? Well, At the end of today's web shop, what we're going to be able to do is talk about the importance of the GED high impact indicators. I want to do a brief pause. If you're working at students who are maybe the GED or the high set is their eventual goal, but they're far from that, there's still a lot of things that you'll be able to pick up from this workshop. Really, everything that we're going to do, you'll be able to pick up today. So don't worry about that. We're going to focus a lot on how to do a close reading. We are also going to talk about developing inference skills, and we're going to use a social studies context in which to do that. And then we'll also talk a little bit about teaching graphic literacy using something that I've discovered recently called a slow reveal graph, which I think is really cool. The slow reveal graph. So please, if you have not already, make sure you have the handout. It's there inside the chat, and I will be referring to it, as I mentioned, fairly frequently. But those are our objectives for today. Hope that sounds fair and hope that's something that we can handle today, which I'm sure it is. So, one thing I want to mention first, and one reason why I love New Readers Press, and my relationship with New Readers Press goes back more than a decade. And I love New Readers Press because, unlike a lot of other publishers where the profits from things that are sold go into who knows where, all profits from any book you buy, any computer instruction you buy from New Readers Press, all the profits from New Readers Press books go to fund the Pro Literacy Organization, which is a great organization that funds literacy causes not only across the US, but across the world as well. So that's one reason why I love New Readers Press, and I'm always glad to work for them because they fund pro literacy, which does so many things to help literacy efforts across the country. So you can feel good anytime that you are doing business with New Readers Press because not only are you receiving some excellent materials, but you are also helping to fund pro literacy, which supports literacy efforts. So let's get into our first point here, which is talking about some of these high impact indicators from the GED testing service. These we'll get into in just a moment, but there are basically skills that our learners should know. And the GED testing service had done a study several years ago, and they were saying, here's where we are seeing learners fall short. And here are some skills that you should really make sure you're teaching inside the classroom. For the most part, these high impact indicators are foundational skills. In other words, these are skills that we can teach at almost any literacy level beyond real basic literacy levels, and they impact our students' growth throughout their studies in what we're doing in our inside our adult ed programs. And the book that's the sponsor of our web shop, if you will, this new test mastery series is based on these high impact indicators. And there are 5 of these books, and they are all focused on these high impact indicators. And these, again, this will be part of the prize package that one can win by fully participating in and attending the entire workshop. So just a note to mention that. Let's get into the high impact indicators. What are they? They do represent foundational skills that are the basis for developments of other skills covered by the GED assessment targets, and they do have broad usefulness that can be applied in multiple contexts. In other words, these can be done in reading in the content area. These will help students as they read, as they do social studies, as they do science content. They really will help also with writing skills and math skills as well, since there's a lot of reading that goes on for the GED math test. So high impact indicators are important. And Dan, if he hasn't already, I would ask please that he put the link for high impact indicators inside the chat. I'll also put one more time the link for the handout that we'll be using and referring to inside the chat as well. So you can grab those high impact indicators. These things are basic, they're foundational, they're not complicated, as the slide says, but they are important for students to know. And the GED testing service, in the research they've done, did find that many times students were not performing successfully on the GED test. And so that this is something that we can focus on inside our classrooms. So these high impact indicators are important. And as I've talked with people, a lot of times instructors have never heard of them. And so it's good to get a feel for those and get to know those, these GED high impact indicators. So let's look at a couple of examples. What are we talking about? What are some of the high impact indicators that we see? Sequencing is one. If we have a narrative text or a text in social studies where things happen, if we're able to order events, that's one. Just determining word meanings. This might literal meaning or figurative meaning in different things that we read, probably especially in literature type situations. And also, we're looking for claims. Is there enough evidence to support a claim? This is something we can start out with, a real basic, easy claim. It doesn't have to be something, as we're just preparing students for the RLA, the Reasoning and Language Arts test in social studies. So those are some examples of high impact indicators. But again, if you use that link that Dan has put in the chat just now, thank you, Dan, you can see all the high impact indicators for all five of the GED subject areas there. So social studies is another one of the areas where we see these indicators. We see central ideas, basically finding the main idea, is that's really a fancy way of saying that. We also have the describing people, places, and environments and the connections between them. We have cause and effect relationships, which we see in many things in the writing test in science and social studies. So we have several of these. You can look at that high impact indicators to see them all. Some examples from science, which be, what's looking at a hypothesis for a scientific investigation, identify what that hypothesis is, and that's really related to the main idea lots of times. Evaluate whether a theory is supported by the evidence, and then looking at independent versus dependent variables in scientific investigations. So those are just some examples of these high impact indicators that we see throughout the GED subject areas. I will stress again that don't wait until students reach the GED level and they're maybe reading at the eighth grade level equivalent before we teach these skills. These are foundational skills for the most part and can be and should be taught before students reach that GED level. And I'm sure we're doing a lot of these things already. It's just kind of a check to see to make sure that we're doing those. If you're using the college and career readiness standards, you are already doing many of these things, or you're using your state standards, you're probably teaching many, if not all of these things already. These are some other things as we get toward more specific areas inside the GED test. So let's look at a few of these that we've looked at earlier. And I'm going to ask you to either respond to this via a chat, or if you want to unmute and speak, we can do this as well. How would you teach, or how have you taught sequencing, getting students to see the order of events in text? How have you done something like determining the central ideas or the main idea of a primary or secondary source? And though that primary and secondary source is social studies specific language, primary source is a living is a document from history, like the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. A secondary source is people who are writing about a historical event, like a textbook is a secondary source. How are you describing the central ideas of a document and corroborating it with or challenging a conclusion made with evidence? How do you evaluate whether a conclusion or theory is supported or challenged by data or evidence. How are you teaching these? And so please, you can chat, or if you're feeling especially brave or talkative this afternoon, and after you've had a moment to think, if you want to unmute and talk about how you do this in your classroom, we are all ears. Lynn maybe not want to participate because she's finishing up lunch, but everyone else might want to do that. Let's see, Joy says she teaches sequencing with comic strips version. That's cool. That's cool. Because we could cut up a comic strip, or in Padlet, if we're doing this virtually, we could organize things there. See, Nan uses timelines, signal words, good, locates data. Small group discussions, thank you, Nan. Sherry uses a timeline for sequencing, and Joy does the comic strip for historical events. Let's see, Tara uses a graphic organizer like a timeline and teaches the signal words. Yeah, those are all good tactics for sequence of events. See, Jonah does the jumbled events, and let's have the students arrange them in correct order. And Olga starts with examples and non-examples. Good stuff. Good stuff. Oh, let's see. Jerry has been typing like crazy, and he talks about central ideas, uses a short video to discuss the idea, and then uses an example of seeing a movie and what was it about. A good answer would express the main idea. Good stuff. We then go on to apply this to primary and secondary text. We've got some excellent ideas here. Thank you, Jeremy. Good stuff. Felicia. All right, good to see you. He does a graphic organizer and sentence strips. And let's see, Mary does timelines. All right, we're getting some good stuff here. And let's see, Samantha does a sequential story featuring signal words. Excellent. Excellent. We're getting some good stuff here. Okay, and yes, Connie, we're getting options here. Of a list, which one's the central idea and why? All these are outstanding, outstanding. Good. Thank you, everyone who has participated for this inside the chat. Awesome. So many ways that we can teach these, and thank you, everyone, for your great suggestions here. Let's talk about close reading. And I first became familiar with close reading. Oh, this was probably 2010, 2011, somewhere around then. And when I first heard of close reading, I thought, this is what we do when we turn 50 and we can't see stuff anymore. And so we've got to look at it really closely. Um, that's just a little close reading humor. That is not what close reading means. I think Mary smiled, so I think I got at least half a smile there. Thank you, Mary, for your smile at the bad close reading joke. Close reading does not mean holding holding the thing close because we're nearsighted. Or is that farsighted? I always forget which is which. That is not close reading. Close reading is really what we do when we are trying to uncover layers of meaning. And I am looking at the handout, and make sure you have downloaded that so you do have the handout. We are looking to uncover layers of meaning that lead to deep comprehension, is the definition that I'm using for close reading. And so this is really a skill that we can do along the continuum as learners are becoming reader from emerging readers. We can do this at a really low level, and I'll demonstrate that soon. I think the biggest thing for close reading is staying curious. In other words, when a student gives an answer, we don't immediately say, oh, that's right. That's exactly what we're looking for. But we're really staying curious and continuing the discussion and getting multiple students' thoughts as we go on through. And if we're asking good questions, which is at the heart of close reading, that will mean that we'll have to go back and reread the text several times to really get its meaning. So that's really what we're talking about first when we're doing just kind of an overview of close reading. The the key to close reading is asking good questions. Like that old saying, you ask a better question, get a better answer. And the type of questions that we want to ask with close reading are text dependent questions. In other words, these are not opinion questions. How do you feel about blah, blah, blah? These are questions that can only be answered from the text. These would be your who, what, when, where questions. There are maybe some why questions as well. These questions can only be answered by using evidence from the text, and that's what drives close reading. We're also trying and hoping to help students build active reading skills, active reading habits. I know I have had times where working with a student in the classroom and they've read something and I've asked, well, what did you get out of that? And it's like, because they've just done a surface scan and they haven't really dived deep into the reading. So part of close reading is trying to establish those habits of the mind, if you will, where students are actively reading, where they're reading this again or a third time to get that deeper meaning. And they're also perhaps doing something like text marking, which we'll talk about in a bit as well. Text marking in its many varieties is a great way to build those active reading skills. So how are we doing so far? So everybody looks like everyone is still awake on camera. Okay. Okay. What are our steps in close reading? And I'm still on page 1 of the handout. We're going to talk a lot about scaffolding. And when we talk about scaffolding in educational terms, really what we're talking about is building a base. We're starting out with easier, more accessible materials and working our way up to harder and more difficult things. So with close reading, we might start with a very short reading passage and work to build up to GED and high set level materials. And then we are also answering those text dependent questions, which our learners are thinking about. And we're not going for the short, cheap answer. We're really trying to spend time, stay curious, and dive into the text. We're asking students to show evidence from the text where they found their answer, with the big goal of being that our students become evidence analyzers instead of question answerers, which many times it seems that our learners are. They become the question answerer. I'm not even sure if question answerer is a real word, but it is. It is when we. It's a real situation that we see there. So let's see, someone in the chat. Aline is asking for the handout, and there is the handout again, the link for you, and welcome to the web shop today. So those are some of the basic steps that we do as we do a close reading. And the one of the things that we're hoping and working for students to do is to do multiple reads. When I first became acquainted with close reading, I was really doing like, let's do a first reading, let's do a second reading, let's do a third reading. I don't know that we necessarily need to be that formal. I think your text dependent questions really guide the way. If you're asking good questions, your learners are going to go back into the material and you're going to encourage them to read it again, or maybe you read it again as a class or a small group. So you do those multiple reads, but it doesn't have to be the formal first read, second read, third read. It does not have to be that way. And if you look at the image on you see on the screen, you'll kind of see what looks like a bullseye. And we're really looking at this from the inside out. We're going to start with the more basic questions. What does the text say? Your who, what, when, where, why type questions. We're going to move out from there with how does the text work, examining the language that is used inside the text. What's the literal meaning? What's the deep meaning? How would it change things if we move to the sentence? That type of thing. And then we're going to go toward what does the text mean? What's the author's purpose? Why did they write that? What are they trying to get the reader to think, feel, do? So that's our goal as we do these multiple reads. And as you see the picture, we have the guide is pointing things out. The text dependent questions that we ask as we do a close reading are guiding the way. So they guide the way through the multiple readings that we hope to do. And I mentioned text marking earlier. This is a goal that we're going to get our learners to do. You'll see on the screen, let's see, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven different types of text marks. You see underlining, circling, a question mark, an exclamation point, an arrow, an EX, X for example, and then a numbering system. And you don't necessarily have to use all of these, or maybe you already have a system of text marking that you teach to your students that works well for you, or maybe you have a simpler set of text marks. This is a classic example of text marking that goes back, I think where these came out of was some work done actually back in the 1970s. So these are tried and true classics. You may have other ones, and I really don't. It really doesn't matter to me personally which marks you use, as long as we get the students in the habit of reading actively. And text marking can help our students to do this. So a word of advice, and we've shifted over now in the handout to page two. The text marks you'll see are at the top of page two of the handout. Um, I would not suggest introducing all these text marks at once. I think you might, especially depending upon your learners, hit overwhelm if we're going to start out by doing, these seven text marks. Here we go. I would instead suggest maybe introduce a couple at a time. And then as your learners become comfortable with those, you can use those. I do like text marks better than highlighting. Um, Highlighting has its purpose, and if it works for you, that's great. I don't like highlighting because a lot of times when we get multiple colors, we get confused. And what did the blue stand for? And what did the yellow stand for? And we may only have one color of highlighter anyway. And so I like text marking, and it's more of an active process than highlighting, which a lot of times isn't an active process. So I would encourage text marks and choose the ones that work best for you or your students. You might look at these and say, I don't want to use all of these, but maybe I'll use three or four of them. Great, that works out well. And as always, I think a great way to teach many of the things that we do is to do a think aloud. And in other words, what a think aloud is we are doing a task, a reading task, a learning task, whatever type of a task, and we are telling our learners by speaking out loud what we're thinking. We are making the invisible thoughts in our brains visible as we demonstrate a task. And so I think alouds are so valuable. Elementary school teachers do a lot of think alouds. We don't always do as many in adult ed, and I think we should because it's important for our learners in many cases to see what's going through our heads as we do this. So we can make our invisible thinking visible, and it helps students see that we're not automatically getting the main idea or automatically doing whatever literacy skill we're trying to teach, that it takes us time and it takes us effort, and to help students realize that good reading is hard, and good reading takes effort, and good reading is not magic, but it is a skill that they can learn and they can grow in doing so. And I'll demonstrate a think aloud here in a few minutes. So, one other thing that I'd like to mention is one thing that sometimes goes against the grain of our teacher's heart. And what I mean by that is the heart of the teacher is to be helpful. And I remember so many times as I've been teaching over the years, when I saw a student struggling, I would immediately want to go and rescue them and save the day. And I would feel good about that because that's what I was being hired to do, was to go in and save the day. I think I had deprived, in many cases, my students of a learning experience by catching them so quickly and solving the issue for them so quickly. And with close reading, we want to stay curious longer. We don't want to just quickly zoom in for the right answer. We really want to think and percolate and mull on the topic and on the questions we're asking. We want students to be challenged by the reading as well. we don't want to make it so hard that they can't understand it, but we want to do something that is a challenge. And even simple text at times can be a challenge, as you'll see as we do a juicy sentence and a nursery rhyme. And the big thing is be the guide on the side instead of the sage on the stage. That's the old classic thing where don't necessarily be so quick to dive in. What we call that is productive struggle when learners are struggling through, but they're gaining ground. And sometimes that's an art form to see when we cross over from productive struggle to frustration, and that's something as we get over time to see when to go in and when to help a bit before the productive struggle becomes frustration. But we want to keep the productive struggle going absolutely as long as we can. And talking about trying to get students to point out the evidence for the answers they give, I was doing a presentation at the GED conference in Long Beach, California last July. And I was in a session, and this one gentleman was saying he taught at a prison, and I forget what state he was in, but he said, I have my guys that I teach in the prison point out the evidence with their big fat finger. And he said, if you can't point to the evidence with your big fat finger, then you need to go back and look to be able to do that. And I thought that was just hilarious. So the big fat finger principle is something we can do with close reading as well, and encourage your students. Can you point to it? Can you show me where the evidence is? You don't necessarily have to have say fat finger if you don't want to, but you can just ask the students to use their finger. You can choose whatever finger you want to use, and of course there are fingers that we need to be careful of, but we that's another story. So anyways, encourage your learners to be able to point out the evidence, and if to use the finger if to use their finger if necessary. Okay, one other thing that I want to mention before we get into modeling close, or before we get into doing close reading, is to talk about modeling close reading. And I had to actually come across this recently, this guy named Gilroy, and he'd written, he's got a lot of stuff on his website about close reading, but this really resonated with me. He said, in adopting, well, this is something I added for context, but in adopting close reading, instructors, we sometimes look for a formula. And when I was first doing close reading, so caught up with let's do the first read, let's do the second read, because close reading is supposed to be based on three readings. But I really thought it was stilted, and it really didn't suit my style at all. So instead of looking for a formula or a recipe, Gilroy says, and I agree with him, transmission, or in other words, getting students to do close reading is much more likely if you model it. In other words, you do that think aloud and show your students how to do a close reading. They will watch what you're doing. There is a We don't have time to get into this in detail, but there are in our brains mirror neurons. And if our students are paying attention and watching us as we are doing, watching and listening as we are doing a close reading, those mirror neurons take notice, and it's as if they are actually doing it themselves. The research is amazing, and we could spend another hour on talking about mirror neurons and all the cool things that they do. But we're not going to do that today. So, anyways, bottom line for this quote from Gilroy is model close reading. The method's less important than the fact that we model it, and the modeling it is not hard to do. Close reading is something that I think a lot of times in education we take something simple and make it more complicated than it needs to be. And I would say close reading is one of those things. So let's come up for air. Let's reflect a moment. So I want to invite you, please, to chat, or again, if you're feeling talkative today and would like to unmute and express your feelings out loud, feel free to do so. I would like you to please put in the chat a reflection on something you've learned about close reading, something we've talked about, or maybe you do close reading all the time and you have a gem of wisdom to share, a question maybe that's come up so far in the overview that I've done about it, or if you have a comment about close reading, go ahead, please and put that in a chat. And I can see people are thinking. Lynn has her thinking pose because she's got her hand under her chin, and that's a good thinking pose. I can tell she's reflecting deeply. Reflecting deeply, that's a good thought pose. So, any one of those, any reflections that you have, something we've talked about, question or comment, and the chat is filling up, and thank you. Okay, while we're putting stuff, Dennis asks a good question. How can test takers adapt text marking for the official GED test environment? Yes, thank you, Dennis. I really think that, well, I know when I read things as a experienced reader, I don't text mark ever. Well, 99% of the time, I'm not involved in text marking. I really think that those active reading skills are such that once we have internalized those and used those, we don't necessarily need to do it on the actual GED test. If that's become a habit of the mind, and that's part of our MO, our modus operandi, when we are reading, we don't need to do it in the actual test environment. So that would be my answer to that great question. Thank you, Dennis. Are you assuming all students can read material on their own? For the most part, Gail, I would say yes. But we can do a close reading orally to get students used to doing it. But that would be, we usually do close readings with students who are reading the material on their own. Yes, that's a great question. Let's see. Sherry uses highlighters. Cool. As long as we're doing an active process, that's cool. Nan says that it's bringing up some things. And Joy mentions text structure. That's good. And we certainly can mention that as we go through in the text dependent questions and have discussions about text structure. That's an excellent tool for comprehension. Can I offer resources for close reading? Yes, the handout is going to be a good resource. The GED test mastery books that will be actual text, yes, will be good sources for that, Rebecca. And I agree with you, Jonah, about critical thinking. Connie, you were simpatico with the short text to build the habit. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, Mary, this definitely can work with lower levels. And Ariji, I'm sorry, I hope I'm saying that right, is is with mirror neurons, good stuff. Comprehensions prior to the readings. Going over the questions before. Yeah, that's a good tactic, Sue. What makes a text worthy of close reading? Jonah, that's a great question. And a worthy text is one that does not give away all of its secrets easily or immediately. And that text can change in difficulty level and complexity as our learners build skills. But one that has some meat on it, Jonah, is a text worthy of close reading. But even a short reading can be a meaty one. Great question. Let's see. Jeremy models first. Good. Classes taught remotely. Jeremy, you can still using the Zoom annotation feature in the Zoom whiteboard. Um, show text marking. You can still, even though your class is taught remotely, keep your modeling sessions manageable or come up for air every so often to get learners to make comments about what's been going on or ask questions is certainly something that can be done. Let's see. Yeah, active reading, close reading, Pam, call it what you will. It's probably pretty similar. And Rose, summarize the text in 10 words or less requires an expansion of words and expressive vocabulary. It certainly does. Think aloud is very helpful. It is good stuff. Okay, good thoughts, good questions, good comments. Thank you all. Thank you all. Turn text to tweet is fun. Yes, it is. Or vice versa. Often have students recite the evidence. Good, Dolores. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, background knowledge. I guess classic close reading, we really don't do background knowledge because we're hoping, but I agree, Samantha, that Well, background knowledge is so crucial to reading, and getting our students to have as much background knowledge as possible is critical. If you want some interesting information about background knowledge and it's how crucial it is, read the baseball study or Google the baseball study. It is an amazing study about showing the importance of background knowledge. Incredible, incredible. And I like to do things like, well, we won't get into that. We're getting far afield. I won't go into that. Okay, so let me model some text marking, and I am going to use the rhyme on the bottom of page 2. Let me see if my annotation is going to work, and it appears it will. So good deal. Here we go. And we've got that. Okay. All right, it's working. So I'm going to model how I would mark this text. So let's pretend that you are my students, and I'm going to do a model, a text marking. So, guys and gals, we've been talking over these last few class sessions about becoming active readers. And we know as active readers, we're not just reading, we're really looking deeply at what we're reading and we're trying to make sense of it. And that takes work, as you've seen. But the work pays off because when we do the hard work, we are able to understand. And that's the goal of reading. We just don't want to read the words, we want to understand what the words mean. So we've been going over these text markings over the last couple of weeks. I've been introducing a couple of them at a time, and now we've got a total of 7 of these. We don't have to use every single one, and we won't use every single one in every passage. But I want to show you how we use it with all of these marks. We've got a text today, which is an interesting one. This is maybe something that you heard as a kid, and it's Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. There are some interesting things in here. And I guess if I'm going to mark this, they've introduced a character here, Humpty Dumpty, and I don't know who this person is. So I'm going to circle this and I'm going to put a question mark there because I really don't know who this person is. I know a few things about Humpty Dumpty. Let's see, because I know he sat on a wall. Um, I know he had a great fall, and I'm thinking of these two things. That's probably versus sitting on the wall, having a fall. The fall is probably more important because falls can be serious. So I'm going to go ahead and underline that. I think that's a key point. This third line is really interesting because it says all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put him together again. So this is real. I am having trouble with a horse. How would a horse put somebody or something together again? I don't get that. How horses have hooves. I don't understand how a horse could piece something together. So I'm going to put a question mark there. I don't get that. The king's men. Oh, so the king got together a group of people, and these are men, maybe these are powerful and important people in the kingdom, but I would be interested to know more about who these guys were. And then they're talking about putting him together again. What does that mean? Does that mean they did some surgery on Humpty Dumpty? Does that mean they did try to glue it back together? I don't know. But kings, we don't have a whole lot of kings around today. There's a few countries that still have kings, but they're mostly ceremonial. They don't really have any real power. I'm thinking this might have happened 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago. I don't know. So there's definitely some things here that I have a lot of questions about. And I'm still have a question about the king's horses and maybe surprised there that a horse is being used to try to put someone together again. Now, if I go to the hospital, I think I might ask the next time, is a horse going to do the operation? Or is a person going to do the operation? Okay, so I'm stopping there with the model. So I was again doing a think aloud. All the thoughts that went through my head, I was trying to share with you as I did the text marking. And you'll see that I did not use all the marks. There is no one right way to mark. This is going to be individual, of course, based on what the student brings into the situation. So, again, this is a gradual process of learning how to do text marking, and this is nothing that students are going to master after one shot. A lot of times we teach something and think they got it. Well, a lot of times they don't got it. And it takes multiple exposures for students to really pick these skills up. So, anyway, let's do a close reading about Humpty Dumpty. And I'm going to go back to the annotation. I am going to, well, let me leave it up while we're talking about Humpty Dumpty. So we can do this again. And please, I want your help with this, please, and thank you. Through the chat. And again, the unmuting option is a possibility as well. So the first question, who is Humpty Dumpty? Let's go ahead and respond, please, however that works. Who is Humpty Dumpty? But as we're doing this, I hope were seeing that we're starting. This is a lot more meatier than what it appears, and we're starting with something very basic. This is 4 lines. There's meat in here. Okay, Joy is starting us off. Um, and Katie is getting us some good stuff here. Now, Felicia, I'm so glad you mentioned this. I would ask you, Felicia, show me in the text where it says that Humpty Dumpty is an egg, and I'll buy it. Show me in the text where it says Humpty Dumpty was an egg. I'm so grateful to you, Felicia, not only because you're an outstanding teacher, and also because you asked that question. Thank you. Thank you. Erigi says a fragile creature. That's interesting. Okay. That no one can put back together. Okay. Connie says, I'm not sure, but somebody important. Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. Could have been political. So he represents individual freedom. Whoa, Sue is really taking our discussion to the next level. Represents individual freedom. And I would ask Sue, explain where are you getting that? What from the text is driving that? And again, I'm not saying, I'm trying never to say you're right, you're wrong, you're here. I'm always trying to say back up what you're trying to say from the text, staying curious. Because we know what happens when we say we're right or when we say we're wrong. What happens? The brain shuts off and we're on to the next question. So staying curious longer. I liked what you said, Dario. That's a very honest answer. We're really not sure. Anne says always picture it as an egg. True. But where from the text are we getting that? The Richard Scarry storybook pictures him as an egg, to be sure. But we're not seeing this from here. But that's interesting to think about. Only know from childhood exactly. Let's see, as a person of great esteem within a monarchist system. Oh, Jeremy, that's awesome. Probably not very diligent because he sat precariously on a wall. But I would ask again, where in the text are we getting that? Because it just says he sat on the wall. Where does it say he sat precariously on the wall? Interesting, Jeremy. I love it. All right. Deb says, is he a toy? That's interesting. And that could well be. That could be broken beyond repair. Okay, thank you, Sue. Okay, great, great, great. Wonderful, wonderful comments. So let's take a look at the second question. When did these events take place? And again, how do we know? What's our clue as to when these events took place? And true, Kenya, thank you. There's no evidence Humpty is a he. That's very, very true. Absolutely. See, Sherry says no evidence of time. Let's keep looking. Is there anywhere that we could get some idea of the time? Do we have any clues that might give us time? See, Sherry says Middle Ages and gives some evidence. Yes, Pamela. Okay. An imaginary. Okay. Thank you, Joy. Vonda's voting for Middle Ages 2. Took place at a time of kings. King's men would be an older time. That's interesting. And I love that Mary said, here is why I got that from the text. Olga says no set time. It does not say in 1492 Humpty Dumpty fell a blue or something. Let's see. Jeremy says Middle Ages, medieval seems to be popular. Yeah, horse-drawn travel, which we really haven't done a lot of in the last 100 years anyway. Good, 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 good. So we're getting some clues and trying to go from there. Let's see. Let's do three. How serious was Humpty's fall? And please use some evidence from the text. Okay, Katie says he couldn't put back together, therefore it is serious. Okay. Humpty is unrepairable. Good vocabulary, Joy. Loving that. Could be in the contemporary UK. That's interesting, Samantha, because there is a king. That's true. Does the king have men, though? I don't know. I guess the king has men, if you consider maybe the butler or whatever. I don't know. Very serious, very worse the contents of think about a great fall. Okay, good, Deb. Thank you. He had a great fall. So this was no 3 foot fence unless Humpty was really, really, really tiny. This was a big wall. Okay, good stuff. We're always trying to drive back to the text, back to the text. What evidence do we have? Even a single word can be important. And Katie, thank you. Great is interesting because it also could be really good. Maybe they got style, hope they got style points like the divers do, perhaps. Let's see. Jennifer says long ago. Here's my evidence: horses, no electricity, no ambulance. Hey, maybe the horses, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Maybe the horses were the ambulance. Maybe the horses took these guys there. They were an early form of ambulance. That could be good stuff. Good stuff. What- I love it, Vonda. Thank you. That's great. So, question 4. How important of a person was Humpty Dumpty? We got some good sense of humor today with Samantha with the king's horses and the king's men. So, how important was Humpty Dumpty? And again, how do we know? How do we know? Let's see, very important. The king deployed all his. That's true. He didn't employ just one guy. He deployed all of them. Excellent. Very important. Important enough to be given attention that he was the king sent menders. Oh, I love that, Sue. Good vocabulary. Okay, and again, great answers because we're going back to the text and we're saying this is the reason why, this is the reason why, this is the reason why. Let's do number 6, trying to get author's purpose here. What was the author's purpose here? Why was this written? Oh, interesting, Jennifer. Takes a slightly different take. Kind of important, but it is kind of like a matter of fact that we couldn't put them back together, and maybe it would be more serious if it was like the kingdom was in despair because Humpty Dumpty fall came to bear or whatever. So yeah, that is interesting, Jennifer. Thank you. See, author's purpose is to entertain. We do like to gawk at disasters. That's true. That is very, very true. I wonder what it is in our nature that makes us want to do that. That's true. A lesson to avoid heights. And as Kenya was saying, a lesson to avoid being too big for our britches or whatever. They may be making fun of the English. Yeah, probably. Probably, Erigi. That's true. An allegory about power. Oh, Dan. All right, we're getting into it here. Your grandmother would say to inform. Your grandmother was a wise woman, Vonda. Yes, indeed. Cautionary tale. Disguised political cartoons. That's true, Sue. There is some good evidence to show that. The fall was a failure. It can be an admonition to not make big mistakes. Okay to make small mistakes, but not big ones, says Gail. Thank you. All right. Good stuff. So let's reflect for a minute. We had 4 lines. We had, what is this, maybe 20 words? But look at the depth of the discussion that we had. We did it with a reading that was very accessible for a lot of our learners. But we really practiced. We did the text marking. We did a deep dive into looking at the passage. We were practicing using evidence to back up the statements that we were making. So we did an excellent job of close reading. And thank you for everyone who participated here. You did such a great job on that close reading. Guess what I'm going to ask you to do? I'm going to ask you to do another close reading. And we're going to do a juicy sentence this time. And a juicy sentence means what it says. It is basically a sentence, and it is juicy because it has a lot of meat inside it. And so let's read it together first, and then I'm going to invite you to do a little text marking. These juicy sentences, I wish I could say I had created these, but these came from a gentleman named Adam Cunell who teaches at a correctional facility up in Minnesota. And I had read an article he wrote in the COAB Journal some years ago, and he has several of these, which I think are absolute genius. This is just one sentence. So here we have the sentence, which reads To Pete, crossing a burning tightrope across the Grand Canyon while dressed as a giant squirrel seemed like a catchy publicity stunt to sell his recent book, The Epic Adventures of an Amazing Suburban Squirrel. Until that is, he gained the interest of a desperately hungry turkey vulture. So I'm going to invite you to take a minute and mark this text, please. So please use whatever markings that you would like, and then we will probably answer some text dependent questions about it. And I would ask that you please mark it on your copy, your handout copy. I'll pop the handout in the chat one more time just in case we had someone who couldn't join us at the top of the hour. That has that now. Yeah, so please mark that on your own copy of the handout. How are we doing? Are we ready to tackle Pete, or do we need another minute? How about if you're ready, you've done your marking, to give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't, don't give me a thumbs up. Okay, we'll give another minute. Looks like some folks are still marking and thinking about Pete. I'm trying to picture Pete in his squirrel costume. Okay, well, let's take a look at Pete here, and let's read it one more time. And I know some of the English teachers and some of us might be saying this is kind of a run-on sentence, but we're not checking this for grammar right now. We are doing a close reading with it. To Pete, crossing a burning tightrope across the Grand Canyon while dressed as a giant squirrel seemed like a catchy publicity stunt to sell his recent book, The Epic Adventures of an Amazing Suburban Squirrel. Until that, as he gained the interest of a desperately hungry turkey vulture. So I'm going to skip around. We've got some questions here, and I would do all of these if I was doing it with students. In the interest of time, we're not going to do all of these. Let's kind of cut to the chase here, so to speak. Let's start with question 3. Because we do have characters with Pete, we do have a turkey vulture. Um, it appears that this is happening at the Grand Canyon. So the big question to start off with is why in the world is Pete dressed like a squirrel? So let's please chat that. Why is Pete dressed like a squirrel? Okay, we're getting several things inside the chat. PR marketing and Erigi brings in something from the text and quotes it with a publicity stunt and gets some love. Also, let's see, gaining attention, book marketing. Um, let's see. And I probably could confirm that New Readers Press has never used a giant squirrel to advertise that product. Is that right, Dan?
Not to my
Okay.
knowledge.
Well, good. And you're probably not going to volunteer to do it, to be the first one to do it. Nor would I. I don't think I would do that. Let's see. Jennifer says to promote his new book by portraying the adventurous squirrel who appears to be the main character. Yes. Okay. So dressing as a giant squirrel is something we would not do ordinarily, but we would if we were desperate to gain publicity for our book. So let's tackle question 4. It says, how do the words desperately hungry shape the rest of the story? How do those key words, so we're looking at language here, and probably especially looking at desperately, how does desperately hungry shape the rest of the story, please? Let's see, Erigi says, introduces the conflict. Oh, Joyce says we get some danger, some excitement. Sue says he'll eat anything. And that's interesting. Danger for Pete. Suggests Pete's likely to be attacked. Okay. Thank you, Gail. Foreshadows the conflict. Nan is obviously a literature teacher. Thank you. Let's see. Jeremy says add some tension. Ooh, all right, Jeremy. Because the we might assume the vulture's hunger poses a threat to Pete. Well said. A fierce fight will ensue. Ooh, I love that alliteration, Dan. Nicely done. Turns the story gory. We get some gone from alliteration to rhyme. Oh, Jonah takes it a slightly different tack with comedic relief. Okay. So certainly a lot of elements of comedic elements with the squirrel costume as well. Interesting, interesting. Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. Thank you. So you were trying to do different things. You're starting out with these knowledge level questions, getting into more in depth, looking at language and how it's used, and then really trying to get the bigger picture, summarize, get the author's meaning as well. So let's take a look at some other questions. Let's do 6. Let's do the summary. Please see if we could do a summary. Yes, questions. Okay. And Siri wants to summarize, but we don't want Siri to summarize. See if we can do it and don't get hung up on the 10 words or less. Try to do in about 10 words. You don't have to count, and there's no bonus points for getting them in 10 words. I do think summary is a really high dollar skill, a high value skill. If students can summarize something, they really understand it, and it's worth teaching students to do a summary. And so many we ask for 10 words because sometimes so many student summaries are basically a retelling of the whole thing. So we want to try to keep the summaries short. And so Let's see if we can summarize in 10 words or less. It's a nice challenge. Let's see here. Or the burning tightrope in the squirrel, or the desperate hunger to each Pete. Tune in tomorrow to find out. See, Vonda apparently has had a career in television or movies with that teaser. Well written. Let's see. He promoted his book with a dangerous stunt and goofy costume. And Sherry's proud of herself since she did 11 words. And I am proud of you too, Sherry. Well done. Pete wants attention for his book, but attracted the wrong one, like a Jonah. An attempt to sell a book leads to a serious problem. Dan, well done. A man attempts this dangerous stunt to promote his book. We can count on Jeremy to use excellent expressive language. Well done. Pete's publicity stunts became dangerous when the hungry turkey vulture appeared. Very good. Pamela. Narcissist. Now that would be interesting. We could have some interesting discussions, Sue, about why you say that. What evidence from the text proves um, that Pete's a narcissist? What authors need to do to market a book? Yeah, I can see you, Dan, at the next sales meeting. I think we should dress Greg Stoltz in a giant squirrel costume. Yeah, please suggest that at the next sales meeting. I'm sure Greg would appreciate it. Let's see, accidentally turns a hungry turkey into a not so hungry. Oh, Irigi. It's taking us to an interesting place. Greg would probably do it. He probably would. Okay, thank you for that. Those were good. Those were good. Let's see, do we want to do one more question? How about let's do question 8. How does Pete's opinions about his actions change during the story? And again, please bring in evidence from the text. How does Pete's opinion change about what he did? How does Pete's opinion change? Let's see, it's implied in the text. And I would say, where is it implied in the text? Gail says he thought he had a good idea, but realized he was unwise. Okay. Jonah gives me some stuff from the text until, okay. Then he got worried. What does the word until imply? Okay, okay, okay. Thank you, Nan. Seemed like it. Okay. So we're getting some other text evidence. Carol, oh, brings back happy memories of Saturday morning cartoons about the Roadrunner going off a cliff. All right. Catchy, okay. Oh, good, 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 good. So Sherry's given us some good words. Catchy to desperate to worried. Good stuff there. Good stuff. Thank you, Sherry. Let's see. Vonda says catchy until he realized. Okay, good. So really seeing that we're not only getting the main idea, but we're using the evidence from the text to back up what we're doing. We talked earlier about using our finger. We're able to point using our finger to point to evidence in the text to show, seemed like, until. If we could talk about the desperately hungry vulture, all those things were some potentially things as well. And Connie, thank you for using the term freaked out. I love it. Okay. All right. So we did there just kind of a mini close reading. In the interest of time, we would certainly spend more time, make sure we do the text marking, really try to dive in and not accept an easy answer. Always encourage the students to go back to the text to back up what that which they are saying. Thank you. Thank you for your great responses. We did very well with this. So was talking about scaffolding. In other words, starting basic. We started with a rhyme. We went to a juicy sentence. We could continue this on eventually with a GED level passage. So that's what our goal is to work up to. Or maybe we start with just a paragraph of a GED level passage or just a couple of sentences. So we can work up to this over time. And the beauty of close reading is we can do it with very, very, very simple readings. Very, very simple. So if we want to see the scaffolding we did shown graphically, juicy sentence, go moving up to a paragraph, moving up to GED level material is how we could do the scaffolding. So students build those skills at the lower level. They'll own them as they move to the more challenging level material. And as we see a lot in text that we get multiple choice questions, and multiple choice questions are in a way that we can do the same thing that we were doing just now. I like to call this the Anita Kerr principle with multiple choice questions because I got this idea from Anita Kerr when I saw her. She's a professional developer in Illinois. Shout out to Illinois. I know we got a couple folks from Illinois here who I saw them do a workshop on this in Georgia. I think it was a couple years ago. But she talked about, okay, we can get students to answer the multiple choice question, but then add rigor to it. In other words, add challenge to it by asking the student to go into the text and underline or point to where they got the information from the text to answer A, B, C, or D. And if we do this regularly and train students to do this, encourage students to do this, it can become a habit of mind, just like text marking, just like multiple reads of a text, just like not trying to get the easy meaning, but going for the deep meaning through doing that. So that is a way that we can add rigor to multiple choice questions by asking students, where did we get the evidence for that? We can bring back the big fat finger and ask students to where they got that textual evidence. I love it. So we can practice the Anita Kerr principle. Thank you, Anita, for that principle. Students in the chat, please. 1 to 5 scale is what you would answer. You'll answer either 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And the 1 to 5 scale is how do we feel about doing a close reading now that we've had an introduction to doing this? Do we feel 1 would be not quite so sure, 5 would be, yeah, I could do this, and I really feel good that my students would respond well to this and I would do it well. Let's see what we've got. All right. Thank you, everyone, for doing this. I'm pleased to see upper ends of the scale. Let's see, Pam saying we're going to do it 4.5. Yeah, and Mary, your point is great. 5 with practice. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Takes practice, takes practice, takes practice. How can you point to evidence with an inference question? We could that's a great question, Kenya. I would say you ask your student to walk you through their thought process. Well, ask the student to walk you through their thought process with an inference question. Great question. Okay, good. All right. I'm glad that we're feeling pretty good about this. Like I say 4 and 5, we're feeling really good about this. That's what I would say. All right, we are going to do a breakout discussion based on what we've just done because I want to kind of we've spent a lot of time on this. I want folks to reflect a little bit on what we've talked about, and it's always helpful to talk to others about what we've done. Dan, it was we do the breakouts, please, and thank you. Could we do let's do 6 minutes. Let's do a 6 minute breakout. And these are some potential things here. Really talk about close reading, maybe something you saw here. If you do close readings, talk about how you do them. If you've learned something for this, talk about that. If you have a question about close reading, you can talk about that in your breakout group. And please, when you're in the breakout room, it's a lot better to have a breakout when you're on camera is when you're out. And of course, I realize that there's some folks it's not possible to be on camera and respect that, and that's okay. But those are some potential questions you really can talk about pretty much anything in the breakout room as long as it's either close reading or if we want to go back to the beginning of the webinar where we talked about the high impact indicators, that could be something as well. And I'll put these questions inside the chat to make sure that we remember and have those as we go through. So Dan, I am ready, sir, whenever you are to go ahead
Okay.
and
How
put our
many
fearless
minutes?
folks in the chat, not in the chat, in the breakout room is what I meant to say.
How many minutes?
6, please.
Okay, here we go.
Thanks, Dan. Welcome back. Welcome back. I'm sure you had a great discussion in your room. I know in room five, we had an awesome discussion. So, good to see everyone back. And let's go forward now. We were shifting gears here a moment. I was We're going to shift gears in just a second to talk a little bit about inference, but I'm going to say now a word from our sponsor and talk a little bit about the GED Test Mastery Series. And you might be thinking, well, Steve, I've never heard of the GED Test Mastery Series, and this is hot off the press. It has just come out very recently. And it is a group of texts that cover reading skills, writing skills, math, science, and social studies for the GED, as well as a teacher's guide, which is really hot off the press that just came out in the last week or two. So, what's is new and unique and good about the GED Test Mastery series? Well, I love it because it really does a good job of using those high impact indicator in GED assessment targets informed its creation. And so, for example, in the reading test mastery book, they do these high value skills, analyzing ideas and relationships, interpreting words, how to do a main idea, how to analyze text structure, understanding author's purpose, etc. So these books are really based on those skills that the GED is all about. And I'm using the time that I worked for as a consultant for GED testing service to base this on. So I've been talking about these books because I believe that they are very worthwhile and that they do such a good job of preparing students. So I know a lot of times we have such a limited amount of time with our students. Some research shows that students spend 50 hours a year in an adult ed classroom. We don't necessarily have a lot of time with our learners. So each book does have a pre-test, which I love. We can have students do the pre-test. We can use the results. And we use results from other assessments we might give on the with the TABE or the CASAS in order to target instruction. So that makes the most of the limited time that we have inside our classroom. It is based on the lessons are based on the I do, we do, you do model of teaching. And so we get some direct instruction, and then it gives us some guided practice for the you do, and it gives plenty of independent practice in ways that students would see it on the actual test and does a good job with that. I also love the test tips that are interspersed throughout it. The arrow points to an example of that. Let's see. I always believe that knowledge is power, and sometimes students are very familiar with multiple choice questions, but a lot of times on the GED, they're not as familiar with other types of questions like the drag and drop item, like the drop down item. And the book does a good job of getting learners used to that by underlining to do the drop down and by drawing lines between to get used to the drag and drop scenario. This is something unique that I haven't seen in a lot of book series and really like that. The I think the authors of this did a nice job with writing lessons in clear language. I know when I did some writing for new readers back in the day, I was asked to keep it at an eighth grade level. I know not all books do a good job with that, or all learning materials we have in adult ed do a good job. I do think they did a good job here. I think the lessons are written in clear language with your learners that are at a grade level equivalent 7 and 8 and above. I think they would really respond well to this. It's not written way above the head. It does a good job of defining terms and using them well. These lessons are based on this is a page from the social studies books. And the lessons are based on the social studies practices. These are habits of the mind that social studies learners should do, like drawing conclusions and making inferences, determining central ideas. They do a good job of weaving these practices throughout the lesson. as well as outlining key vocabulary that learners need to do this. And I was looking at the GED assessment guide yesterday, actually, and comparing the words in these texts with the GED assessment guide. The GED assessment guides have a glossary at the end, and those are words your students should know because those will appear on the GED test. And the book authors have done a good job of including many of those words that are in the GED assessment glossary in their text. Um, there's also connections to the real world. We're always trying to do things to make what we're learning relevant. And there are plenty of those real world connections, as well as skill tips to help as we're learning various reading or writing or math skills to pick up some skill learning as we're going through the various lessons. One thing we do a good job a lot of times as educators is giving practice of the thing that we've just done, but we don't always do a good job of giving mixed skill practice. Or, in other words, if we were working on main idea, we'd give a bunch of questions with main idea. But then if we learned another skill the week before, we're not mixing the skills together. And the unit reviews inside the GED test mastery books do a good job of doing mixed skill practice. And there's some interesting research that it did by Rohrer in 2015 about the effectiveness of mixed skill practice. A lot of times, if we don't go back and practice the mixed skills, learners don't always remember them. And so these texts do a great job with the mixed skilled practice that research shows is so effective. Visual literacy, especially in the social studies books where this is a page from, it does a good job talking about charts, graphs, tables. And again, the vocabulary is highlighted at the front of each one of the lessons. And each one of the texts does have a practice test. And the practice test also has a chart where if we miss questions, we can go back and see what areas students are still struggling with and might need a little bit more help with. So a lot of good things. Dan, are you running, as New Readers, running a sale on this month that we should know about?
Hey, Steve, I had to unmute there. So, yes, I'm going to put this in the text. I'm sorry, in the chat. You caught me off guard for some reason, so let me look it up real quickly here. The promotion code is MAY25, May 25. And anyone that places an order and gives that promotion code this month can save on any of our pre-HSE materials. Those are books, the core skills books, and the pre-HSE skills workbooks. Any of these new GD test mastery books, high set material for those high set folks out there, and even our TABE prep and CASAS prep materials. All of that is on sale in the month of May. 10% off. Use promo code May25.
Thanks, Dan. And again, one reason I love New Readers Press is because all the profits from any sales of any of their products goes to support literacy efforts through the pro literacy organization. So you can feel great when you buy a New Readers Press book because it's supporting literacy efforts around the world. They're doing some amazing things all over. So, um, yeah, thank you for putting that in the chat. So that was a word from our sponsor. So, and thank you, New Readers Press, for sponsoring this webinar today, this web shop today. All right, let's switch gears. Talked about close reading. Let's talk about inference skills. And if you'll join me in the handout on page 5, I'd like to think about inference as really an educated guess. And as we're talking about inference skills, I really think that we do inference all the time. We just don't necessarily call it inference. And I think if we can draw students' attention to that, in many cases, our students and us have to have good inference skills in order to be able to survive, to read the mood of someone in their community is an essential skill in a lot of places. And so our learners have developed this skill. We just have to help them to show how it's used in an academic context. So we do develop inference skills and basically inference educated guess. We use a lot of our experience, of course, and then we're also trying to use text evidence as well. So, and I invite you to chat this. We have a picture here on the screen. How is this person doing? And I guess we're not necessarily using textual evidence, but what in this picture would tell us how this particular person is doing this? How's this person doing? How do we know? Please put that in the chat. All right, Joy is quick on the trigger here. See, oh, she's got her shoulders down. That was some very deep looking, Joy. Confidence, says Deb. A smile of confidence. Thank you, Mary. Okay, relaxed. She has a bright, yeah, she gets bright lighting and good weather. That's not what we've had in North Carolina these last few days where it's been raining like crazy. Doing well. She's smiling or surprised by something or one of slight embarrassment. Oh, Dan, you were really going to it here today. Looks satisfied with her status. Oh, Sue, thank you. Slightly wistful. I would expect nothing less from you, Jeremy. The slightly wistful look. It's on a beautiful day. Oh, love it. She has a crush on the boy that just walked into class. Fonda, that's too funny. That is too funny. She's content and working on something. She's enjoying her surroundings. Felicia, beautifully said. Beautifully said. All right. So we did some inference there based on a visual, and everyone did an excellent job backing it up from that. So reading like a detective is one way that we can develop inference skills. And detectives always look for clues as they are reading different things. So let's look at this particular picture. We have, if we can kind of gaze at the whole thing, it looks like we had some type of that we had, notice the past tense. Well, let me not say anything more. Let me say this. Let's please chat again. What happened and what clues are there for what happened? And perhaps we could touch on who is responsible for what happened and why do we think that way? So, what's going on here? How do we know? What evidence from the picture tells us?
Steve, we might need you to stop share and reshare because for some reason your toolbar and things that you're clicking on are now showing up when they are not supposed to.
Okay,
Isn't that odd?
that is odd. How are we doing now?
So far, so good.
Okay. Oh, I know what it was. I had optimized it for showing the video that I was going to show. That's why you're seeing it.
Oh, okay.
That's the reason. That's the reason. Let's see. RG says the dog has guilty eyes. The toy is destroyed. Okay. The dog's in trouble with the owner and is now feeling guilty. And let's see, Sherry's, because we talked about inference based on experience, with Sherry is bringing this in, got carried away and destroyed the toy. Mr. Pookums, the toy, is now in pieces. The toy was not indestructible. What if the toy is related to Humpty Dumpty in some way, shape, or form? Olga, oh, I messed up. Okay, let's see. Oh, Jeremy, we've got to read your comment. Here's there is a plush toy, probably not the dog's plush toy, based on its look of guilt and shame. The dog indulged in a moment of frenzied joy that afterward began to realize the consequences of its actions. Let's see. Dog looks guilty. Dog made a mess. Vonda, I didn't want to destroy it, but she left me alone too long. My anxiety kicked in. And now my favorite toy is destroyed. Interesting. All right, good stuff. So we're practicing good inferences skills because I saw comments where we were using both our experience. Dog owners were quick to just chime in. I've had this experience before, but we're also using our evidence skills, our detective skills to see what's going on and why. Okay. So just like we did with the close reading, where we started with the basic and then we moved on. We can also scaffold our inference skills as well. And we could start with a video, we could move to pictures, we could do political cartoons, and then we could go to sentences and GED passages. So inference is a great skill. And we could do multiples of these in the same class session. It's not something like it would take us weeks to do. We are probably not going to well, let's see. Let's go ahead and try it. Let me make sure that we've got this enabled. We'll start with the video. And while I am making sure that this is going to play, hopefully, I want you to think about an inference here. There is a young man receiving a graduation gift here, and I want you to chat in just a minute. What gift does he think he's getting? What is his inference on what gift does he think he's getting? And what gift is he actually getting? Let's hope this will play successfully.
A blindfold, Mom, really?
Happy graduation, sweetie!
I can't believe you.
Should we tell him?
No, let him tire out first. Not yet. He's losing steam.
Marry me right
So
now!
marrying you right
Mom,
now.
we're getting married!
Best day of my life. Hey, Steve. Best gift ever. Love the car. Best gift ever. Woo! Best gift ever.
Okay, let me play a little bit of the part. And my apologies for the scream. If you weren't expecting, a couple of folks might have dropped their coffee there. So let's just look at the beginning part again. Again, our goal is to decide what gift does he think he's getting? What gift is he actually getting?
Blindfold, Mom, really?
Happy graduation, sweetie!
I can't believe you.
Should we tell him?
No, let him tire out first. Not yet. He's losing steam.
Marry me right
So
now!
marrying you right
Mom,
now.
we're getting married!
Best day of my life. Hey, Steve. Best gift.
I think we've got the idea. So please,
A blindfold, Mom, really?
please chat. What gift was this young man getting? And what gift does he think he's getting? What gift is he actually getting? And I'm going to unshare the sound and optimize for video. There we go. Okay, what are we getting in the chat here? Let's see, Jeremy. Yeah, political cartoons do take some time. I would agree 1,000%. And several folks have mentioned he was actually getting the fridge. And I would say, how do we know that? And Jonah answers, we think he's getting the fridge because there was a bow on it, but the car being front and center, he thinks he's getting it. Okay. Actually getting the mini fridge. Gotcha. So we started out with a video, and good job with using the textual evidence from the picture, because we pointed to, okay, there was a bow on the fridge. That's a gift for a graduate, or maybe a high school graduate as they're going off to college. But it looked like he inferred the sports car because it was there. Now, a warning for what we're going to do next as we scaffold with this particular picture. If you know what this is already, let's not reveal the whole secret. If you're you may have seen this before, especially if you're maybe a social studies teacher. Let's not reveal the whole thing. Let's just talk about first, what do we notice? What do we wonder? And take a look, please, carefully at the picture and just put in I love doing the notice wonder protocol because regardless of skill level, all of our students can notice things, all of our students have questions. This levels the playing field for any students regardless of their literacy level. So look real closely at this picture. What do you notice? What do you wonder? And then chat as you're ready, please. Oops, I did not mean to do that. I meant to bring up the chat. There we go. Okay, we're getting some good thoughts here. Sherry says that the she in the picture is prompting him. I wonder if he's writing what she's saying. That's interesting. Let's see. And RG says signing, the woman's checking his spelling. Jenna says she's helping him write. Wonder if he has some kind of disability. Interesting. Diana goes with signing the letter. See, Sandra thinks she knows it is. She's presented a document. Let's see, he's either reading or writing a letter. He looks concerned. He's using pen or pencil, says Joy on some paper. Person in the dress is holding the paper. Wonder if reading or giving an opinion. And you use the word holding, which could be significant. I wonder, is she pointing with her big fat finger to the evidence or is she holding the paper? That's a thought. That's a question. If they're writing, wonder what the document is. That's a good question, Pam. Because it looks like it's kind of folded. Wonder if it's a letter. I don't know. Let's see. Jeremy says he seems to see an official looking seal. Um, there's some dark black circles on the same desk. Okay, many other letters. Second opinion on his work. Well, he has a question. Black and white's important. Okay, RG, that could help us maybe determine time frame since it's a black and white potentially. Let's see. Felicia says reading over their work to review the document. Okay, we've got some good stuff here. I've used this as a springboard to a social studies lesson about presidential power and about presidential health, especially. And you've really given some good things inside of the chat. Thank you. I won't leave you hanging. I'll give you the rest of the story. As several folks correctly stated in this, the person who is sitting down is President Woodrow Wilson. And the person next to him is his wife, Edith Bowling Galt Wilson. President Wilson had in fall of 1919 an incredibly debilitating stroke while he was on a train trip in the Western United States trying to drum up support for the League of Nations. And he had a stroke. I think he was in Pueblo, Colorado. And they took him back via train to Washington, D.C., where a day or two later, he had a massive stroke in his bathroom. And he was totally paralyzed on his left side. He was virtually incapacitated for months. And his butler basically said he was as dead as a man could be, but still be alive, or words to that effect. In other words, he wasn't far from death. And essentially, for the last 18 months of his term, he was a virtual invalid. As he got a little bit better, he spent some time watching movies of him going to the Paris Peace Conference, but that was a big day for him. And generally, his wife, which some people say Edith Bowling Galt Wilson was the first woman president. I would argue that she was more of his chief of staff because she determined who saw him and who didn't. And there was really a massive cover up that was going on for this last 18 months of his term because he was really not medically fit to be president at the time. And it's amazing how history rhymes, but I want to get to the tangent because we have other things to do. I could talk about this all day. You may not want to listen about it all day. We could then go on, if we're teaching inference skills, to doing a political cartoon. And this is on in your handout toward the bottom of page 5. And I agree with what Jeremy says. Political cartoons are challenging for a lot of students because they require background knowledge in a lot of cases. We can give students the basics, like Uncle Sam stands for the United States, and a lot of cartoons are based on events going on at the time and that type of thing. Yeah, none of us were born understanding how to read a political cartoon. Our students can learn this, and usually there's certain symbols that appear fairly commonly that we can use. Let's look at this. Let's do notice wonder again. There are some questions in the packet on page 6, but what do we notice about this cartoon? And again, if you know the whole thing, this may not be the time to share everything, but share what you see in this cartoon, and let's see if we can make some sense of it. think about, what time period is this? What does the caption mean? What might those initials we see mean? What is that thing that we see? So, any thoughts that we notice or wonder? If you're a social studies teacher, you know what this is. Oh, I didn't see your comment earlier, Vonda, about the Woodrow Wilson picture on the honey-do list. I guess on his honey-do list was get better so you can run the country again, was the big thing on his honey-do list. Yeah, Joy, your point is well taken. All cartoons require a whole lot of inference and thinking, that's for sure. All right. Let's see. Ergy talks of biblical allusion. I would want to know more about that and what you mean specifically. Let's see. Joy says NY jumps out first. It leads one to think this. So Joy thinks that's a snake, and she thinks that the snake pieces are states. Sherry seems to agree. Let's see. And Dario is guessing that this might be sometime in the 1700s with the 13 colonies. Let's see. Jeremy says a good inference might be states colonies based on the initials. Eduardo, though, says Civil War, calling for the northern states to be united. That's an interesting interpretation. Erigi, snake association with the turning point in the myth of creation. Erigi, you are next level thinking here. Next level thinking. All right, can't live without being together. If that is indeed a snake, if we've ever dealt with snakes, and I've been called on to kill more than one in my time, we know that they do not survive well if they're in pieces. Let's see, the southern states are included, so it makes me think of Rev War instead, says Joy. Okay, good. We're having a good discussion. Join or die is dramatic. What does it mean? I would say. What does that mean exactly? So let me get another thought or two here. Oops, did not want to do that. Okay. All right, we've got some good stuff. And Joy says if the snake's not all together, it cannot survive. So we could do some inference. We could, gradually help learners with what's going on in this particular one. And as several folks had alluded to or said correctly, this is a Revolutionary War era political cartoon, and I believe Ben Franklin wrote it, if I'm remembering correctly. But all the letters do indeed represent some of the colonies. It's just that NE, New England, is an abbreviation for several of the New England states like Vermont and New Hampshire and Delaware. It's no, some of the New England states. We won't get into the weeds with that. And that the colonies needed to remain united or they would die at the hands of their British oppressors. So, moved from the video, moved to a picture. We've gone to a political cartoon. We could also continue the inference skills with a sentence. I like to use this. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. We would want to bring in some background knowledge. We could look at 1933, what's going on there, and students might need a little bit of or a lot bit of information about the Great Depression and what's going on there and what was going on in the US during that time and why are people afraid and what's going on, and talking about the 25% unemployment in 1933 and those interesting things. So scaffolding through, and then eventually our goal would be to move up to GED level material. So similar process with close reading, we can scaffold. I just think starting with either pictures or videos for whatever we're teaching really gives all learners something they can ground to and they can get. And then when we're teaching a new skill, plus they're trying to tackle the reading, it's two strikes against them from the get-go. That's why I love starting with pictures, videos to teach a skill. That way they've got the skill a little bit. And as we're trying to decode and unpack the reading, that's a little bit less mental brain power that we've got to use if we start with that video, if we start with that picture. So that is helpful. So we kind of see a little bit with the scaffolding is how that looks. And that takes us up through page 7 in the packet. Um, so unfortunately, the would never have enough time to do every single thing that I want to do or would like to do in these, and I'd even requested longer time with doing 2 hours. But I'll show you the last thing that we were going to do, and that is something that actually discovered recently in a webinar that Connie Rivera in Connecticut did the slow reveal graphs, and I think our folks at Collect Ed NY in New York had created these. But slow reveal graphs is a way to kind of hook our learners with visuals, because a lot of times we throw them a complete graph or complete chart. And there's a ton of information floating around, and sometimes we get lost or we can't see the forest through the trees. Where the slow reveal graph starts out, and we can use the notice wonder principle that we were using earlier. And they are easy to create. I've taken a page from one of the GED test mastery books and just covered it over with sticky notes. If you have a doc cam or something, or you're teaching online and you're able to show it through the camera, you can then remove these sticky things over time, the sticky notes over time, to reveal more information. So here's how it might look. We'd start with this. We've got this simple bar chart. What do you notice? What do you wonder? At this level, with as little information as presented, students are going to wonder. And the wonder part is great because everyone loves a mystery. Detective stories are some of the most sold books ever and sell still millions and millions and millions and billions of sometimes of copies today because of the mystery factor. Agatha Christie books are some of the best-selling books of all time. Those books have sold in the billions because people love mysteries, and a mystery is an itch that begs to be scratched. And if we can get our students wondering about something and solve a mystery, we've got them hooked for the lesson. So we would start with just revealing a little bit and then reveal more as time goes on. We've gone from just the bar graph to the percentages. Then we could reveal, in always asking the question, what new information is there? How does it help? And now we've got some words or some things down at the bottom: AL, GA, LA, MS, NC, SC. I wonder what that is. And we could keep asking, what's the new information? How does it help? And we are on page 8 of the handout. And the where you can find more of these slow reveals, there's a clickable link there. But we would continue just to slowly reveal what's gone on inside the graph. Then we realize that, oh, these are states, and it appears that these are southern states. And then we see that, oh, these are percent registered that have gone from 20 to 60%. And then we get a little more information in the top left where we get black voter registration in southern states. And then we get more information about the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and how the registration changed between that. And then we get the title for this particular bar graph, which was the impact of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So slow reveals are a neat way to hook learners, to teach that visual literacy, and do so in such a way that gets mystery and buy-in throughout. So you could decide. Some of these slow reveals have like 10 different slides. There's several other websites where they continue to show those, but the ones in Collect Ed New York, they've got a lot of good ones, and Collect Ed New York does a lot of adult ed things, so it's some good stuff. So this brings us to the close of our session. And if you feel that you have, and this is something that you can decide about whether you feel that you've met the web shop expectations, if you've been participating throughout, however you feel that looks to you, put your email address in the chat. And again, if you couldn't put yourself on camera and you had a good reason why you couldn't, camera was broken, you're in a correctional facility, whatever, that is okay. But if you'll put your name, or you put your email, excuse me, put your email inside the chat, please. You are entered into a drawing to win one of the GED Test Mastery books. And we will be getting that your way, holding up the science books. And yeah, just make sure you spelled it correctly, and you can win one of those books. And don't be hard on yourself if you put some stuff in the chat. If you said something during the breakout room, if you've been here the whole time, or even if you just missed the first 5 minutes, that's okay. Please put that email address inside the chat, and I will grab this and get those email addresses so we can do the drawing. And we will let you know via email, of course, whether you are one of the big winners, and then we'll have the wonderful folks at New Readers Press send that out to you. And it was been my joy this afternoon or this morning, depending upon if you're a left coast or right coast, to be here. And remember, this is first of three. If you can attend next Thursday, same time, I'll be doing a writing focused session. And then 2 weeks from today, I'll be doing a math focused session. But thank you all so much.
Yes, Steve. So on behalf of New Readers Press, thank you for presenting today. Great information. I also want to thank all of the participants, because it makes these things so much more enjoyable when other people are bouncing their ideas around off of one another.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Thank you, everyone.